has been transformed into a fortress with 25,000 National Guardsmen drafted in, razor wire and fencing everywhere. Now, nearly 2 weeks on from the storming of Congress by a mob incited by Donald Trump.
We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
The shock in America over that attempt to overthrow a fair and free election seems to deepen with each passing day, not dissipate, and Washington has become a city on edge. The last time the president was seen in public was a week ago when he went to the border wall, something he'd point to as one of the achievements from his 4 years in office.
And today we celebrate an extraordinary milestone, the completion of the promised 450 miles of border wall, 450 miles.
But it will be his behaviour since the election that will be his lasting legacy. His wife, Melania, has released a video bidding her farewell, though in a clear break with tradition, she's not invited the incoming First Lady to the White House.
The past 4 years have been unforgettable. As Donald and I conclude our time in the White House, I think of all of the people I have taken home in my heart and their incredible stories of love, patriotism, and determination.
Joe Biden was yesterday packing meals for a food bank near his Wilmington home. This evening, he'll address the twin concerns of COVID and economic hardship. The Trump presidency is drawing to a close in the disgrace of his second impeachment and a trial still to come, and a death toll from coronavirus about to pass 400,000.
Well, earlier this evening I spoke with Julia Manchester, political reporter with The Hill, who's in Washington, D.C., and she says there's certainly a feeling of anxiety throughout the city.
There has been so much drama, I think, leading up to this inauguration, to Vice President or now President-elect Joe Biden's win in November, to President Trump contesting those election results, and even to the events just over a week ago in the Capitol when we saw all of that violence and rioting break out. That all led to very tight security here in Washington, and there definitely is a feeling of anxiety throughout the city, this fear that a potential violent event could happen ahead of the inauguration or during inauguration week. So you do see the U.S. National Guard and Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police very much out in force today.
And as we saw in the report by Greg Jenner, Joe Biden and his wife are staying not far from the White House on the eve of the inauguration. What are the proceedings for the day?
Well, they're going to look very different this year than they have in the past. Normally, the president-elect or incoming president attends church at St. John's at Lafayette Square. That's, of course, the church where President Trump and the authorities deployed tear gas last year so he could have a photo op in front of it with a Bible. Now we're going to see Vice President or President-elect Biden go and attend church there, along with some members of Congress, members of his incoming administration. And normally he would go to the White House and be greeted by the president and First Lady, and he would go along with the incoming First Lady. That's not happening this year because we see that President Trump is leaving at 8 or 9 a.m. in the morning. So, definitely a very different welcome for President-elect Biden than past presidents.
Indeed, we're expecting to cover Trump leaving the White House too in just a couple of hours from now. Now, crowds have exceeded 1 million at previous inaugurations. Far fewer are expected this time around, though.
Far fewer, and we knew even before the insurrection at the Capitol just over a week ago, we knew that it was going to be a more digital or virtual televised event. Normally you have crowds lining the National Mall, staying in hotels and Airbnbs across D.C. However, before the events of just a week and a half ago, President-elect Biden said it would be more like a virtual event. So he'd be sworn in on the steps of the Capitol, but all of the celebrations would be virtual. We obviously have that televised sort of inaugural ball or special hosted by Tom Hanks that will appear this evening in the U.S. on television. However, with the events at the Capitol and that insurrection, we now see that the National Mall is completely locked down and that it's nearly impossible for U.S. civilians to get close to any federal buildings. So it's going to be a very different kind of event that we've really ever seen before.
And Julie, what access do journalists have, and how has covering this event been different compared to previous inaugurations in your view?
Well, journalists still have access. However, the access is definitely more limited. So while I won't be at the Capitol Hill today, we do see that other outlets are allowing one or two people, are allowed to send one or two people to go cover it. So it's much more scaled down, and that's obviously because of security precautions and coronavirus concerns. But I think for journalists, it's been definitely a tough couple of weeks here in Washington. We saw that violence that broke out at the Capitol. There was a lot of very violent rhetoric heard during that incident, really spewed towards journalists. So it's been a difficult couple of weeks for journalists, and I think they are definitely maybe a little more on edge today.
Meanwhile, as you mentioned, we are going to see Donald Trump leave the White House. Do you think he could possibly make any big announcements today? There's talk that he's starting a new political party called the Patriot Party.
Well, it's possible. Donald Trump is definitely one to try to get as much attention on himself, to get that spotlight on himself. And I think I wouldn't put it past him to do it on President-elect Biden's inauguration. However, he's been very quiet over the past couple of weeks. That's partially because he's been banned from Twitter. But it's possible that he will say something. But I think it's very telling. He leaves Washington very alone. Normally, the outgoing president and vice president have some sort of photo op, leave together, or have some sort of unity, a show of unity before they leave. Vice President Pence will not be seeing President Trump off, according to his public schedule today. And we saw that the vice president put out a tweet yesterday reflecting on the past 4 years. They were pictures with his family, him doing a number of events or traveling during his tenure as vice president. President Trump was absent from all of those pictures.
As we've been reporting, the expectation on Joe Biden to bring a deeply divided America together under his presidency is staggering. Martin O'Malley was a Democratic candidate for president in 2016. He's also a former governor of the state of Maryland, and he says the country will need to heal under Joe Biden.
This is going to be an inauguration, the likes of which our country hasn't seen for a long time. To see federal troops actually inside the rotunda of our nation's capital is a really humbling sight for all of us as Americans. We have to be not only grateful for this day, but also resolute that we govern well into the future so that this Trump era can be looked back upon as a course correction rather than some rather than the end of our republic. So I'm excited and I'm relieved, and I know that Joe Biden will be that healing force that our country needs right now. Joe Biden is a man who himself has experienced some tremendous losses in his own life. He is exactly the sort of wounded healer that our country needs at this time. And his challenge in the remarks in this inaugural first day of his administration is to give voice to the politics of purpose. Our country has suffered over the last 4 years from the politics of despair, the sinking sense that somehow our best days are behind us. And Joe Biden's task is to call us forward, to realize that there is a greater purpose to our country and confronting climate change, being a leader among nations, giving our children and grandchildren a safer, healthier, better future. These are the purposes that are worthy of a great people. And that's what he needs to do, give voice to the politics of purpose in order to overcome the politics of despair. As far as Donald Trump's behavior and his not being on the podium and not participating in the transition, I don't think many people here are very surprised by that. Sadly, it's a bit of a relief, I think, that he won't be on the stage and on the podium. It's sad for our democracy, but in terms of getting the Biden administration off to a good start, this is not a group of people who, like Donald Trump, have no idea where the restrooms are in the White House or the Capitol. I mean, Joe Biden is a person with a tremendous amount of experience, a man who understands the institutions of this American republic, and I believe that he's going to hit the ground running, not only to put down this pandemic and get us through the recession that has been caused by it, but really to call us again to a higher sense of purpose as Americans, to be a nation among nations in this world, in the destiny of the people of this planet.
And US President Donald Trump has released a recorded farewell message on the eve of his departure from the White House. Mr. Trump praised his administration's achievements in foreign policy, immigration and in medical developments on the COVID-19 pandemic. While he didn't mention his successor Joe Biden by name, the president did wish the new administration well.
Has always allowed America to prevail and triumph over the great challenges of the past has been an unyielding and unashamed conviction in the nobility of our country and its unique purpose in history. We must never lose this conviction. We must never forsake our belief in America. The key to national greatness lies in sustaining and instilling our shared national identity. That means focusing on what we have in common, the heritage that we all share. At the center of this heritage is also a robust belief in free expression, free speech, and open debate. Only if we forget who we are and how we got here could we ever allow political censorship and blacklisting to take place in America. It's not even thinkable. Shutting down free and open debate violates our core values and most enduring traditions. In America, we don't insist on absolute conformity or enforce rigid orthodoxies and punitive speech codes. We just don't do that. America is not a timid nation of tame souls who need to be sheltered and protected from those with whom we disagree. That's not who we are. It will never be who we are. For nearly 250 years, in the face of every challenge, Americans have always summoned our unmatched courage, confidence, and fierce independence. These are the miraculous traits that once led millions of everyday citizens to set out across a wild continent and carve out a new life in the Great West. It was the same profound love of our God-given freedom that willed our soldiers into battle and our astronauts into space. As I think back on the past 4 years, one image rises in my mind above all others. Whenever I traveled all along the motorcade route, there were thousands and thousands of people. They came out with their families so that they could stand as we passed and proudly wave our great American flag. It never failed to deeply move me. I knew that they did not just come out to show their support of me. They came out to show me their support and love for our country. This is a republic of proud citizens who are united by our common conviction that America is the greatest nation in all of history. We are and must always be a land of hope, of light, and of glory to all the world. This is the precious inheritance that we must safeguard at every single turn. For the past 4 years, I have worked to do just that. From a great hall of Muslim leaders in Riyadh to a great square of Polish people in Warsaw, from the floor of the Korean Assembly to the podium at the United Nations General Assembly, and from the Forbidden City in Beijing to the shadow of Mount Rushmore, I fought for you, I fought for your family, I fought for our country. Above all, I fought for America and all it stands for, and that is safe, strong, proud, and free. Now,
do stay with us on ABC News. As we've been reporting, Donald Trump is scheduled to leave the White House for the last time as US president within the next few minutes. You're looking at live pictures out of Washington, D.C., where it's almost 8 a.m. local time, almost time for President Trump to leave the White House from the South Lawn. The presidential helicopter, Marine One, you can see there, is waiting to take him away just a few miles to Joint Andrews Base in Maryland, where he's reportedly organised a send-off event for himself at the military airfield there. So we can see staff loading some boxes into Marine One, where Donald Trump will board the helicopter. And after boarding that helicopter, he will arrive at the military base, where he'll have an event there, and then fly aboard the Air Force One jumbo jet to his private Mar-a-Lago resort and residence in Palm Beach, Florida. And of course, all of that before Joe Biden is sworn in as the 46th US president. And of course, minutes beforehand, Vice President-elect Kamala Harris will be sworn in, becoming the first woman and the first Black and Asian American to serve in this role. And right now we're looking at pictures of Donald Trump. We're expecting him to depart the White House for the very last time. It's shortly just before 8 o'clock in the morning. Now, do be sure to join us for our rolling coverage. Michael Tetlow will be taking over next, followed by a special edition of News Breakfast from 3 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And we'll, of course, get the highlights of Joe Biden's inauguration at 9 a.m, hosted by Ellen Fanning and Stan Grant here on the ABC News channel. Do keep it right here. We're expecting to see Donald Trump leave the White House for the very last time. We have the Marine One presidential helicopter waiting to whisk him away to the Andrews base in Maryland. I'm Yvonne Yong. Do keep it right here on ABC News.
Washington on alert as America wakes to the day of Joe Biden's inauguration.
We did what we came here to do, and so much more.
Free at last, dozens of refugees released after being locked up in hotels for more than a year. Another tennis star says sorry following a backlash to quarantine complaints. And the Test triumph for India leaves the Australian cricket squad wondering what to do next. Welcome to ABC Late News. I'm Michael Tetlow. At any moment, Donald Trump is going to leave the White House for the final time as president. As America prepares for the handover of power to Joe Biden, Mr. Trump will be flying south to his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida. This is a live shot from the south lawn of the White House. That is Marine One standing by to take Donald Trump and the First Lady Melania to Florida after the end of his 4 years as president. The helicopter has landed only in the past 5 minutes or so, and we are waiting now to see when the president and the First Lady appear. They are going to fly to the Maryland base of the military. There'll be a 21-gun salute. Mr. Trump is expected to say a few words before boarding Air Force One for the final time as president for the flight to Florida. As the president arrives at Mar-a-Lago, just as the inauguration gets underway, he will be behind the walls of his resort as Joe Biden is sworn in as the 46th president of the United States. The pandemic will be Mr. Biden's priority as he begins his presidency. Ahead of that, he honoured the 400,000 Americans who've lost their lives to coronavirus. Greg Jennett is in Washington.
Hallelujah, hallelujah.
The beacon on the hill stood, dimmed a little in the background. Shafts of light to the fore captured all the attention.
Let us shine the lights in the darkness along the sacred pool of reflection. Remember all whom we lost.
They flickered for the 400,000 Americans killed by coronavirus in a pandemic that becomes a new president's to tackle.
It's hard sometimes to remember, but that's how we heal.
Joe Biden's deep in remembrance and reflection on where it all began for him.
You know, it's kind of emotional.
In his hometown of Wilmington, at the National Guard Centre named in honour of his late son.
I only have one regret. He's not here, because we should be introducing him as president.
Mr. Biden had some farewells to make to the people who sent him to and kept him in political office for 4 decades.
When I die, Delaware will be written on my heart.
Parting in sweet sorrow, he's now called to higher duties. No more civil air from here. It's Air Force One all the way. Every element of military protection's mustered to protect the Commander-in-Chief. 25,000 National Guard will ensure his oath is sworn without incident.
Safety in America? No problem with this. This is what keeps Americans safe.
And that armed militia across the state line in Virginia stay right where they are. Blair House, heavily guarded by the National Guard, is where the Bidens will spend their inauguration eve. From tomorrow, once sworn in, it's across Lafayette Park, into the White House and down to business. Only then, with Donald Trump long departed, might the extraordinary security clampdown on this city begin to be relaxed.
As I conclude my term as the 45th President of the United States, I stand before you truly proud of what we have achieved together.
A recorded video message may be close to his last word in office. It gave a nod to the unnamed successor he'll spurn by not being at tomorrow's ceremony.
We extend our best wishes, and we also want them to have luck.
And it sought to condemn deeds done by rioters under his name.
Political violence is an attack on everything we cherish as Americans. It can never be tolerated.
The tribulations might in time pass as Donald Trump does, into the night at the dawn of a new presidency. Greg Jennett, ABC News, Washington.
So Donald Trump is due to depart the White House at any moment, and Joe Biden is 4 hours away from being sworn in. Let's go live now to Catherine Diss, North America correspondent. Catherine, what's the mood like there at the moment?
Good morning, Michael. Well, this city really is on edge. It's been bracing for more trouble for a week now, with questions over whether or not there would be protest groups descending on Washington. But as you can see behind me, there is a significant military presence here on the ground. That has been the case for the better part of the past week, Michael, where most street corners have been cordoned off like this with armed National Guard troops. We just walked our way here about 3 kilometres from our office, and every street corner looked exactly the same. It's trying to prevent anyone from getting any closer to the Capitol building, the White House, the Supreme Court, on foot or by car. So we're just going to take a bit of a walk over here just to give you an idea of just, the number of people that are here on the ground. But yeah, this is a sort of military presence that we have seen established here in Washington over the past week, to the point in which it's now being called a militarized green zone in the nation's capital. 25,000 National Guard troops here, and the number of police officers here has been increased 5-fold to ensure that there is no trouble and nothing repeated like what we saw at the Capitol building just a couple of weeks ago.
Catherine, you were there when that happened, when that crowd did storm the Capitol building. How does the street compare now to the hours before that insurrection happened?
Look, it's a completely different set of circumstances. The law enforcement officers that were on the ground here were completely overwhelmed and overpowered when that happened. In the hours after that occurred, we saw the Mayor of Washington, D.C., and also federal police act very quickly and swiftly to bolster those numbers pretty much overnight, and then we started to see the National Guard deployed and those numbers ramp up very, very quickly. So it is a completely different sort of feel and set of circumstances where just a couple of weeks ago we had tens of thousands of supporters of the president filling the streets, and now we have thousands of National Guard troops filling the streets. So it is a very different feel, and it is eerie, it's quiet, and the sort of feeling that we're getting is police sirens and the sounds of forklifts setting up more fencing. That's what it's felt like for the past week.
Is life going on in any way at all? I mean, we can see there are buildings behind you, office buildings. It's a government town. Are people going to work? Have you seen anyone, doing the morning commute?
Yeah, there most certainly are people still commuting and going around on foot. I mean, you've probably seen behind me there are, people still riding their bikes and heading off to offices. But a large part of central Washington has been closed down, and shops have been boarded up to be able to prevent any sort of trouble happening again. But there are also dozens of road closures. You can't really enter here from Virginia or Maryland, which are the adjoining states. And the road closures that have been put in place to prevent people from getting close to things like the Capitol building, which you can see behind me there, has prevented anyone from sort of getting in here. And most of what we've been doing in the last few days has been walking around on foot, because you just simply can't get anywhere by car.
We're expecting the President to leave the White House at any moment. Marine One is parked on the back lawn, ready to take him off to Maryland. Is he a man who's known for running on time, and is there any reason why he would be pretty keen to get out on time today?
Yeah, look, we are expecting him to have some sort of farewell event today. It was meant to be taking place as we're speaking now, Michael, at a base in Maryland. But to my knowledge, I'm not sure if that's happened. He generally is late to events, typically by an hour or so. So I can't give you specific details on when that may well take place. But we know that he wanted some sort of military send-off and flyover type affair. We're not sure if that's going to happen, but we do know that his Vice President Mike Pence and also some senior Republican members of the party are not going to be attending that, and that is because they will be attending the inauguration of Joe Biden, where Donald Trump will not be. He will become the first president in 150 years to not attend the inauguration of a president after being one himself.
North America correspondent Catherine Diss in Washington DC, thank you for that, and we'll talk to you a bit later on. In his final hours in office, Donald Trump has pardoned and commuted the punishments of 143 people. Among a long list of names is the president's former campaign advisor, Steve Bannon, who was charged with defrauding donors to pay for personal expenses. Others include a former Detroit mayor jailed for corruption and rapper Lil Wayne, who was awaiting trial for firearm-related offences. Mr Trump hasn't pardoned himself, members of his family, or his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. So while the pardons may be one of the last things Donald Trump does in office, the first thing for Joe Biden will be his inauguration speech. Like many incoming presidents, he'll try to reunite a deeply divided nation. And he's likely to adopt a very different tone from his predecessor. Here's John Barron.
4 years ago, Donald Trump delivered a bleak vision of America.
Rusted out factories scattered like tombstones across the landscape.
And he vowed,
"This American carnage stops right here and stops right now."
It was a far cry from Franklin Roosevelt's cheery confidence at the height of the Great Depression in 1933.
That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
That set an optimistic tone, helping to restore the banking system and eventually the American economy. But if government was the answer to the economic woes of the 30s, by the 1980s, Ronald Reagan argued government was the problem.
It is time to reawaken this industrial giant, to get government back within its means, and to lighten our punitive tax burden.
In 1961, during the Cold War, John F. Kennedy, the first president born in the 20th century, said a torch had been passed to a new generation, and he called them to service.
And so, my fellow Americans,
We'll leave that story there now and take you back live to Washington, D.C., to the South Lawn of the White House. And the President, Donald Trump, and the First Lady, Melania Trump, are emerging from the White House for the final time as President and First Lady. They are heading towards Marine One, the helicopter that will ferry them towards the Joint Base Andrews in suburban Maryland. There, they'll be looking at a military-style send-off, expecting a 21-gun salute before they board Air Force One for the final time to fly to Florida. We can see the President saying a few brief words there to the waiting crowd. It's a very small crowd, and we can imagine things in Washington are fairly tight on a security front at the moment, so there are not big crowds here to say goodbye to the President and the First Lady. But they are heading now to Marine One, the helicopter that will take them to Maryland, where they will board Air Force One to fly to Florida ahead of Joe Biden's inauguration as president. That is due to happen in about 3 hours and 45 minutes' time. We're expecting the Trumps to be behind the walls of Mar-a-Lago by the time that inauguration takes place. So the president is waving goodbye to his staff and crowds for the final time as president as he exits the White House and boards Marine One bound for Florida. This is quite an extraordinary time. This is an extraordinary period in our history, watching a man who's become one of the only presidents, the first president since 1869, to refuse to attend the inauguration of his successor. It is quite extraordinary. He has refused, as we know, to accept the results of the election, and now he is going to depart Washington, D.C. ahead of Joe Biden's inauguration. We'll bring you more on this story as it happens in the coming hours on the ABC News Channel. The Prime Minister has brushed off accusations he pandered too much to Donald Trump during his presidency, saying the Australia-US alliance is not a political plaything. Labor leader Anthony Albanese says Scott Morrison undermined the alliance by drawing too close to Mr Trump and neglecting relationships with key Democrats. And he argues Mr Morrison didn't directly condemn the president's role in inciting the assault on the Capitol earlier this month because he didn't want to upset pro-Trump backbenchers in his party.
He remains afraid of the far-right extremist fringe dwellers who make up the bedrock of his personal support and who he cultivates through the avatars of Trumpists and conspiracy theorists.
Personal attacks are not foreign policies, and the leader of the opposition thinks sledging me as some sort of foreign policy, well, he just doesn't get it.
The Prime Minister says it's crucial for Australian leaders to maintain close ties to US presidents. Dozens of refugees brought to Australia